You are about to enter a great adventure.
This is Starting from Gorilla.
Hello, everybody. Strutting from Gorilla is back. Happy Labor Day to everyone. We hope everybody enjoyed their time. And now we are diving into fall. And with that dive, we are diving into a Superstar Spotlight episode today. A very special episode talking about the career and legacy of the 16-time world champion, current movie star, future WWE Hall of Famer, the Doctor of Thugonomics, John Cena. Definitely looking forward to this one. Vito, how are you feeling about today's podcast?
I'm excited about it. You know, I think for me personally, John Cena is not at the top of my favorite wrestlers of all time, but I also respect him a lot, and I'm excited about this episode because he's done a ton for wrestling and for WWE, and kind of took the brass ring at a time when he needed to. So we'll get into it more as we move along, but yeah, I'm excited about talking about him.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about just some of his accolades, our first exposure to John Cena, some of our favorite matches, moments, rivalries, and promos, and overall just his significance on the wrestling industry. So we're really looking forward to this conversation today. But before we really get into anything, just got to remind everybody, you see a ticker at the bottom of the screen. Use all that information. Find us on the socials. Use our website. You can get connected to everything you need there. Keep subscribed, like our channel on YouTube. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star rating and review. We'd love to hear it. But let's dive into our boy, John Cena, Massachusetts own. I mean, I'm not a Massachusetts native, but you are. So it must mean a lot more to you than me.
Yeah, you know, I think it's one of those things where if you look at his accolades and what he's done in the business, it's hard not to put him up there as one of the greatest of all time. I think for me, when I hear that, and I think it was just recently, I think Triple H even called him the greatest of all time. You know, if I was doing the litmus test here and you said, who's the greatest wrestler of all time? For me personally, I wouldn't put him up there. But I think it's because he was at a time and an era that was outside of what kind of was in my zone. You know what I'm trying to say? Where I was like infatuated with wrestling. And we'll get into it a little bit more about some of the stuff that he's done. And I think it's one of those things where, like I said, you have to respect him. And I do. And he's done a ton. I mean, I think the biggest feat he has done is his Make-A-Wish Foundation record. I think it's over 650 Make-A-Wish visits with children, which I think is unbelievable. And I think he has been a great ambassador of not only professional wrestling, but especially of WWE. And I think that's a really important piece. And his longevity of what he's done and kind of how he's done it definitely has to be respected. But again, not my favorite wrestler of all time. So I'll leave it at that. But Mikey, why don't you go through and talk about some of the stuff that he has done throughout his career here as we kind of move to the end of it.
So absolutely. And I do want to address something that you said about just how you view Cena and maybe where we were as fans at that time when he was coming around. But we'll get to that in a second. But let's run through just some of his career accolades. You know, we found this on cagematch.com, so everybody can find this. But like you said, Vito, he has the all-time record for Make-A-Wishes granted, which is arguably his best accolade with what he's done for kids. He's a 4-time tag team champion, which this surprised me, with 4 different people.
Yep.
HBK, Batista, David Otunga, which I looked it up, and technically this is kind of a cheapo one because he sort of like won and lost in the same night, and it was kind of the same thing with his next partner, which was The Miz. So he's a 4-time tag team champion, still 5-time U.S. champion, which one of the parts of his career that I really liked was that U.S. Open Challenge. That was pretty cool.
Agreed.
And he's a 16-time champion. And the breakdown is he's a 3-time, world heavyweight champion, back when they had that before it was the WWE World Heavyweight Championship that they just brought back last year. And he was a 13-time WWE champion and soon to be Hall of Famer, I bet.
I thought he was a 16-time. Oh,
well, he's 16 altogether.
Yes, you
know how it. Remember how confusing it used to be.
Yes,
how it is again.
It still is. Yeah,
but yeah. So, all right. So those are his accolades. They kind of speak for themselves. But to address something that you were talking about, how your view of him isn't necessarily at the top of greatest wrestlers of all time, and sort of where you were, and listen, we were both in college at the same time when Cena was starting to hit his stride at the top, in the main event scene of WWE. So one thing that I noticed was, I think this was like a time for me when when I was, as a fan, I think I was becoming more critical, and maybe it was just like the stage of life we were in. That's how I view it for myself. I went from bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, just absolutely gushing over everything that was happening from like 1998 to 2004. It was like the height of that attitude era, right? And so once we left high school and like got into college, like you start critically thinking a little bit more, you start questioning things. And so I feel like a part of that was sort of like rebelling against like what I felt the establishment was, and John Cena represented that for WWE in my eyes. I know I have a weird kind of take on things, but for me, I was watching this guy ascend to the top of the card, and I was like, what's so good about this guy? I just started questioning that. Well, I never had any real evidence, but I just would question just how good he is. And so I was more apt to criticize him than sort of appreciate what he had been doing. My first interactions with him, as a, not so subtle way to segue here, was probably in 2003. I remember I went to a show. It was at a SmackDown at Madison Square Garden. Also a very famous show because Mr. America was unmasked as Hulk Hogan during that particular show. But I remember watching, I think it was John Cena. He had just started the Doctor of Thugonomics kind of thing. And he was fighting, I think, Orlando Jordan, if I'm not mistaken. It was kind of a short match, but that was my first exposure to John Cena. I didn't really know what to think of it at the time. It was just like, he's just a guy, just a regular guy. It was before he really kind of found his footing. But what was your first exposure to John Cena?
So I have kind of a part A and a part B, and here's why I'll tell you that. The first time I really knew who he was when he came out and did the ruthless aggression segment with Kurt Angle on SmackDown. I remember it specifically. I was like, who the hell is this jobber? Like, who is this dude? He looks like a mixture of Arnold Schwarzenegger and like Val Kilmer. Like I had no idea. He had the
Val Kilmer. Wow.
He had the stupid trunks on, just very generic, like creative wrestler, like look, and I was like, I don't know who this dude is. And I'll never forget, I was in high school at the time, and I was dating a girl, and she was watching wrestling with me, and she was all about this dude. Love this guy. And I hated him. I just thought he was stupid. But my real first interaction with him, and this is going to make you laugh, because when I was in high school, I think I could probably speak for you too when I say this. I think our dream was always to be a professional wrestler. And at some point that was definitely a goal of mine when I was in high school. And so I remember being in Newbury Comics or FYE or Sam Goody or whatever it was at the time.
One of the greats.
Yeah, whatever it was at the time. And you go through the DVD section because you're walking around being a mall rat, and I'm in the used DVD section, and I see this DVD with all the wrestling DVDs, and it's Become a Pro Wrestler. learn to wrestle. Kind of like, remember like the Suzanne Summers workout videos and everything?
It's like learn to wrestle at home.
Yeah, pretty much. And so I take it out, I look at it, I'm like, oh, what is this? Who's on the cover of it? John Cena. Before he was even known. He just like,
No way.
yeah, I told you, he's a very generic creator wrestler look type of guy, right? And he's on there. And I remember watching the video at the beginning, and I don't think I ever watched the thing. I probably have it somewhere still. I'll try and find it. But I remember watching the whole thing through, and he's the guy like showing you how to do all the moves. He wasn't speaking, but he was just like
he's like modeling the moves.
Modeling the moves and like how to do them, like how to grapple, how to lock up, like all this stuff. And I'll find it, and I'll maybe I'll try and post some clips of it or something if it doesn't get copyright taken down
Doesn't take much for that to happen
on YouTube. But yeah, that was like my first experience, and I was like, oh, this guy. And I want to say, like, before he went to Ohio Valley Wrestling, I forget where he was, but his name was the Prototype. Like, that was what he wrestled as. Like, that was his gimmick, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, very like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator type of look. Like, that's just how he looked. And so it fit his bill perfectly. But that was the first time. And then I remember he came on TV and during the Ruthless Aggression, I'm like, dude, this guy looks familiar. Where did I see him before? And I figured out he was on that DVD. So anyways, those were my first real experiences with him. And so I kind of went through it all, and then saw him. He turned into the Doctor of Thugonomics and was a heel, first time and only time in his career. And I personally liked his Doctor of Thugonomics run. I thought it fit him perfectly. And to be honest with you, he was a pretty damn good rapper. I mean, he came out with his own rap CD, wrote his own music, like pretty impressive for a guy that seems very vanilla on the mic. You know, for him to then come out and show that personality, it was pretty impressive. So
yeah, I think that was the thing that got him on the map, was that like kind of late 2002 into 2003, where he had said it in interviews himself, where he was sort of on the chopping block, and so that led him to sort of make this shift. And I'll level with you, I liked it. I think so. To rewind here, part of our preparation for this podcast was just, I wanted to make a match listing of his whole career. And I didn't want to start it in 2002 because I feel like that's beaten to death with the Kurt Angle Ruthless Aggression spot. So I wanted to just start from 2003, where I feel like he really found his footing and just onward. Sure. So I used a little artificial intelligence here, which had like some mixed results. I will say that it was like 85% accurate, but I had to go back and do a lot of fact checking, and they had some matches that weren't real. So like these AI hallucinations that these matches never occurred, but it said it occurred. So I was able to do some course correcting here, and got all this whole match listing, which we're gonna, I think, hopefully post it in the show notes, like a link to it, so that people can see it. But you know, as I started, and I didn't get through all of these because it's close to like 40 matches on this thing, but I started from 2003. And I have to tell you that something that I really enjoyed, speaking of his heel work, was one, how, like you said, how good he was at rapping. I thought it was a great way to sort of pull a promo. It was different at the time than what we had seen a lot of people do. And two, his match quality was really good early on. I think a lot of the criticisms that we levied on him once he was sort of at the top of the card was that, you know, the 5 moves of doom and everything that people, fans, if you ask them, that was sort of the common thing. Like every Cena match was the same. And it was sort of like, you know, like Hogan towards the end of his big run, where it was like, okay, everybody knows what's going to be happening in this Hogan match. He's going to be posing at the end. Same thing with Cena. But I have to say, those 2003 matches, 2004, even 05, I mean, he had some absolute classics. If you go back to Vengeance 2003, he has a match with The Undertaker, and it's American Badass Undertaker version. It's one of the better matches you'll see. Undertaker does a great job in that match. Cena sells his ass off in that match. Then they actually end up fighting again in 2004, and that's another classic. I mean, I found myself kind of being more enamored with his wrestling ability. It was sort of the more I went back and watched it, and maybe this is just nostalgia and like the thing, it's happening to all of us, right? Like you just go back in time, and time is sort of kinder when you go back and watch it again. And so maybe that's what I'm noticing right now. But I don't know. Have you had a chance to go back and watch any of his older stuff?
A few, not as much as I had wanted to, but I think you hit the nail on the head with that, and I personally think it's less about his ability to wrestle and more about the opponents that he had available to him at the time, right? I mean, when he first came in, again, you can watch every documentary you want that's on WWE Network, and they're going to talk about ruthless aggression and how John Cena kind of was a big piece of that, right?
Right.
But I think at that time, we were in a very big transition period in WWE. You're coming from the Attitude Era where you just lost two of the biggest megastars of all time, and they're no longer really in the company, right? And now people have to step up. But you still have veterans from the Attitude Era like Edge, Undertaker, Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels was coming back at some point during this time. Like those people are still all there, and these guys understand the psychology of wrestling. But then you still have newcomers coming up like Brock Lesnar, Batista, Randy Orton. Like you're getting this new class of people. And don't forget about Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho, all still there, right? So it's this weird transitionary time. And I think during that ruthless aggression era, you still were getting pieces of the Attitude Era with those people that are still there. And John Cena, I think, was able to take advantage of that by being able to wrestle with them and get the rub from a lot of those guys. Whether he was winning or losing, he was still being able to get in there with those greats. And I think that was a really big piece to this whole thing. I think as John Cena moved on in his career and he moved from the Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick into his, what I'll call goody two shoes superhero gimmick, kind of Hulk Hogan 2.0, I think that's when, for me, he represented something that I didn't like. And it's quite honestly a big reason why we started this podcast. We go into this kind of PG era and WWE resets the Attitude Era to the ruthless aggression to kind of this PG era. And John Cena is just getting forced down our throats. Like, that's the piece that I wanted nothing to do with. I don't like being force-fed things. If I like someone, I like it to happen organically. We talk about it all the time on this show. And he represented that piece that I didn't like. And I think that's where you saw a turning point in his career from the Thugonomics piece to this goody two shoes where people started to like him and he became Hulk Hogan 2.0. And I think kids loved him, but the people who were coming out of the ruthless aggression era that were older, that had watched the Attitude Era, did not like this. And that's where you started to see a lot of that change. And I'm going to talk more about that as we go on. But for me personally, that's what I saw. And I think it's a really interesting piece to all of this.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because when I like reflect on it, I think, yeah, he definitely represented something that in my eyes, I didn't feel like we recognized it. It was as if like the wrestling had started to shift a little bit, and not even a little bit. It shifted a lot. And because of that, I think whenever something was really good, it's hard to, one, keep that going. And two, if there is changes to be made to it, how do you not end up losing the people that you brought on in the first place? And I think that was just almost like a price of doing business. Like they knew that there was going to be some sort of drop off, but they also had this idea of who they wanted to really cater to more. What was going to be more sustainable, catering to kids or catering to us jamokes in our teens and early 20s at the time?
Sure.
You know? So I think they needed Cena to sort of represent that. I also look back on it, and this is from the rewatch too that I'm noticing. You had guys that had attitude. you had Randy Orton, you had Brock Lesnar, you had Eddie Guerrero, you had Batista, you had Edge. All of those guys were different than Cena. And so if I were, this is one of those what if games, but if I was going to go back and like rewatch some of this stuff now for the first time, I would have tried to enjoy them for what they were, more than being focused on, oh, they're just going to lose to Cena. That kind of became my thinking. It was like, oh, they're just going to job out to Cena and he's going to get, he's going to do this phenomenon that we used to call the Super Cena, which was where no matter what the odds were, John Cena would end up coming out on top. And there are several moments along the course of his career where you're going to see that. We're going to end up kind of talking about, like, just touching on it. But, I think I would shift my thinking going forward if I were to do that again. But it's just something I noticed, going off of what you said about, the shift. The attitude was there. It was just, it was toned down.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what I tell you. I think he was, again, I respect his career, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't my cup of tea through a lot of the stuff he did. And I think his run when he was big in 2000, 4, 5, maybe even a little bit later, into like 2014, 15, it was such a force-fed thing. It was everything we talked about, the cogs of WWE. He was one of the first people to come out of the Ohio Valley Wrestling group, where it was like they trained and did everything WWE's way. And again, you got some great people that came out of there, but I just think everything was force-fed to you because it was a time when it was just different. You're transitioning from these big stars where the company was at the peak of anything it's ever done, and eventually things fall. You go through ups and downs, but I think that's where you saw this big shift. And it was right around that time, Mikey, where people started, the whole Cena sucks, let's go Cena chance. It was the first time you'd seen something like that where the crowd was divided.
Yeah.
And it was like, why is that? And it went through his whole career. But you know what? That would have been a time when WWE turned somebody heel, and they never did. I would love to have seen what would have happened if he went heel. And I think it's talked about to this day. Like, it's
The
one
what if.
piece. The what ifs. And maybe his career goes a different direction. Who knows? But it definitely something that could have been interesting, but definitely a time in the industry. And for WWE, again, there was no competition. They bought their competition. This was what it was all about. They could do whatever they wanted to, and as long as people were watching, whether it was kids or people from the Attitude Era, they didn't care, and they just kept pushing the machine along, and they kept coming out with good content. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everything about WWE at that time period was terrible. It kept sucking me back in. It was one of those things. It was like, okay, here I am. I'm watching, but I'm not watching it like I am now or like I was when I was younger. Right? It's a different time. And anyways, that's the part I didn't love about it. And you add on top of it, you talk about the matches, and during his beginning run, I felt like, okay, he was putting on good matches, but again, I think it had to do a lot with this competition. And you get into the middle of his career where basically he was winning against everybody, like he never lost, because they were trying to, put a rocket on him. And for me, I think fans didn't love that because they were being force-fed this guy that, while I think he might have been pretty good in the ring, I don't think he's the greatest technical wrestler of all time. I don't think he was as bad as people give him credit for. He's unbelievable on the mic. I mean, you could put a mic in that guy's hand and do anything, and he would be good at it. I mean, it's evident by the transition from being a rapper to being like this superhero style guy, and to him now being an actor. But that's where I look at these and I say, okay, well, what was it that you didn't like, Vito? And this is where it was. And I think it stuck with me. Now, here's the thing, and then I'll let you speak. I know I'm going on a little bit here.
Sure.
But what the best thing happened to his career was when he started to become a part-timer. Because for me, that's when I started to like him more, because I was like, oh, I need some more John Cena, instead of them just being like, you like John Cena, you need to watch him, he's going to win. And like, nobody else stood a chance. They weren't letting anyone else be a star. Like, and I think CM Punk was the perfect example of this. Although they did give him a little bit more reign because he beat Cena a few times, but like that's where I think the frustration set in. And I think a lot of people respected CM Punk for the pipe bomb that he dropped because it was a lot to do with Cena and more to do with the people in authority at the time and how they were, you know, pushing people to the top. And I think people resonated with that, and that's what brought CM Punk to the top.
Yeah, that moment was definitely a shift in, I think, how they started to look at different superstars outside of John Cena. But since this is a John Cena episode, I'm going to focus on him.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I actually disagree with you on the fact that he should have turned heel.
Okay.
I thought he was fine. The heel character he had from 03 to 04 was great. I think he did a great job with it. Sure. Do you wonder what would this look like with a guy with more experience? A guy with now main event WrestleMania experience? What does that kind of heel character look like? Who's sort of been there, done it? But I thought that we got what we needed at the time. And this is where I don't want to go back in time and change things anymore. Is like,
sure.
I think that it happened the way it needed to happen. We kind of needed John Cena. He was like the Dark Knight. He wasn't like the wrestler we wanted, but it was the wrestler we needed at the time. He was the guy who was going to give you that shift. And I know I talked about this just a minute ago, the shift from the Attitude Era, the raunchy, the TVMA to the PG era, right? You needed that guy. And he was the perfect guy to do it because of just the appearance. He had the clean cut look and also all the stuff that he was doing out of the ring with Make-A-Wish. And I think just his character in general. He's a very likable guy. I think he was really one of the first examples that we've seen maybe in our lifetime of a truly polarizing wrestler, because there were people, adults, that were staunch Cena fans, included not just the kids. There was adults that were really into John Cena. And then you had like the diehards, the people that like us that were the holdovers from the Attitude Era that didn't want this guy doesn't look like the guys we used to cheer for, so why would we cheer for him? And it feels like that he's being shoved down our throats. But he had the biggest star power at the time. However, one thing I really enjoy about like kind of this reflection that we're doing on John Cena is his promo work was just unmatched. It's just unmatched. I mean, the guy was, like you said, he was fire on the mic. And he was the only guy that could handle a crowd like that was both booing and cheering him at the same time. And I'm telling you, without fail, by the end of that promo, everybody was cheering him. So he was doing something right. He was smart. That's the thing that I think sets him apart, is sort of like the intellect of John Cena to recognize that I'm going to constantly encounter opposition to what I'm trying to do, to what the company's sort of trying to do. So the amount of pressure that was put on him to be able to walk out there and to not only engage with the fans that were cheering him, but also engage with the fans that weren't, and not just give into it. Because I think that's something that happens a lot in modern day wrestling, right? Like we just give into it because we don't want to have the backlash, because God forbid people complain, right? So I think that he was perfect in that role to be able to sort of mitigate that. And this is why, as time went on, that kind of let's go Cena sucks chants were more in jest than anything. That's kind of the way I interpret it. I didn't think people really hated him after probably from 2012 on. I think
agreed.
Just there was that period of like, oh yeah, we really don't like him. And then they're sort of like, oh, he's kind of in on it. So let's just kind of keep rolling with it.
I agree. I think a big turning point for him was ECW One Night Stand. I talked with you a little bit about this, but right before that match, you could see like people were kind of starting to get a little bit fed up with him and the gimmick that he was portraying. I want to say this was, would you say this around 2004, 2005, probably 2005, 2006?
I think this was 06. Yeah, the 06.
Yeah, it was somewhere around that era. Things get a little flaky for me in that time period, but yeah, it was somewhere around there. And they brought back ECW. And again, I'm not going to put all of, again, this is my opinion, and this is just how I feel about Cena. So there are plenty of people out there who would speak differently, but I think this at this time in WWE, I mean, I'm gonna give the fans and you something. Go on the Wikipedia website for John Cena and try and follow his career. It's ridiculous. It's impossible to follow. It's like ADD on a sheet. But I think a lot of it had to do with also the direction of WWE. When you don't have competition and all that stuff, like they were grasping the straws with Raw, SmackDown, ECW, all this stuff. But I found it very interesting because John Cena was representing this new era of wrestlers. And they do this ECW one night stand in basically home turf of ECW and the Attitude Era fans. And it was like throwing him into the lion's den because nobody in that arena had any inkling of liking John Cena. And they televised the pay-per-view. And even before the pay-per-view, I think it was him versus RVD. Can't even remember the match all that well. I think it was a decent match. I mean, RVD was a great wrestler. I think it was a decent match. But all I remember is that before the pay-per-view, there were people saying, if Cena wins, we riot. Like, it was a huge deal. And people just turned on him in that arena. So now all of these people who maybe had some like, I don't love Cena, but like, you know, he's kind of the face. They saw all these people just being like, Cena sucks. And they were going in hard, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge turning point for this like riff in the fan base of John Cena, right? Like after that, that's when the Cena sucks, let's go Cena chant started hardcore. And I honestly feel like, again, I don't know if it was purposeful. I don't know if it was just an outcome of what was going on. But again, they kept putting him down our throat. So now that's when my mindset was like, all right, there are definitely people out there that hate this guy. It's not just me. And again, hate's a strong word. That's not how I felt. But like, I think it just opened up that whole thing. And it just exploded. And it was insane to watch. But he almost became the face of everything that the fans of the Attitude Era didn't like. And I think that's where it came from. But again, that's just a piece of his career that I want to talk about. That was one match that stuck out to me. If we're going through some other matches that really stuck out, I think the rivalry with CM Punk after he did the pipe bomb again, but that was propelled by this whole mindset of like pinning the fans against each other, and CM Punk was the voice of the voiceless, right? The voice of the fans that felt like they were being force-fed a product that they didn't like. And I think a lot of people resonated with that at the time. And so I think you saw this giant CM Punk popularity. And at that point, Cena wasn't a heel, but it felt very heelish to me. And I thought the match was great in Chicago. I think it was, you know, if you believe in the rating system of Dave Meltzer and the stars, I mean, it was his only 5-star match that he had. I thought it was an unbelievable match. I think the storyline that went along with it felt very real. It was the first time you felt a real rivalry that was personal, and you couldn't distinguish between what was reality and what was storyline at that time, which felt great. It was refreshing at the time. And so those would be kind of the, you know, I don't know that the ECW one was technically a match that I remember, but it was the situation surrounding it that
Sure.
What about yourself?
Well, one, I agree with you on both of those. I think that match with RVD at One Night Stand, there's something about like when an atmosphere just makes a match feel even more monumental than maybe it would be on paper. Not that RVD wasn't a big star, but you put him in that environment, you put that opponent against him, and it is just a recipe for magic to happen. And that was that made the match more than anything itself. None of us are necessarily going to remember the moves. We remember the famous when he throws the shirt into the crowd and they keep throwing it back out, and he kind of does this like 4 or 5 times before he just kind of gives up on it.
Yeah.
the sign, the Cena wins, we riot. The pop that RVD got when he came out was insane. It was absolutely
for a
insane.
small arena. For a small arena,
right? What the run in with Edge at the end of it, he spears Cena, and then the 5-star, and there is a cool moment there of RVD holding the belt, and I think that's just like a great moment for him. But that may not have played out the way that it did if that opponent wasn't John Cena. So this is why I come back to like this needed to happen the way it did, because in some ways what that could start to do is make other stars.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, you just got into a high profile rivalry with John Cena. You may not have walked out the victor, but you still get a rub from working with a top guy. And that's no different than the way wrestling works in general.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So yes, RVD, great. The match with Punk, great. That brought me back into wrestling back in 2011 when that was going on. For me, man, well, like I said, those Undertaker matches from 2003 and that SmackDown, June 24th, 2004. If you can stand to navigate Peacock, look for that SmackDown. You will find that match with The Undertaker. It's mainly for people who have trouble with that WrestleMania match that they had, where it was basically just Undertaker squashing them back in 2018. Yeah. Those will leave a better taste in your mouth. WrestleMania 23, John Cena versus HBK. I thought that was a real test for him in terms of like his wrestling acumen. Michaels tested that guy, and that match went on for like over a half hour. It was an absolute clinic that they put on, and to John Cena's credit, he held up. So what that told me is the skill was there, but that may not have been what Vince and kind of the creative was calling for him to sort of put out there in his matches. So if for anybody who has questions about his wrestling ability, go back and watch that WrestleMania 23 versus HBK. I'd also encourage you to watch 22 versus Triple H, because I think that was one of his first big tests against an established star. One of the first times you hear the Cena sucks chants, because people had that that connection with Triple H and to the old era. And I can see you wanting to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, because the only thing I'm going to say is that these are all guys that put on great matches without John Cena. So like, give me an example of a match with someone who isn't in that realm that he put on a great match with. Like, that's the only thing I'll say. So like the Shawn Michaels, you could put a doll in the ring against Shawn Michaels, he's going to do good. I'll even go one step further. Let's take the Attitude Era people out of it that already had great matches that are ring professionals.
Sure.
AJ Styles. Again, AJ Styles is very much the new generation of Shawn Michaels. Again, you could put him in the ring with anybody and he's going to put on a good match. And he had a good match. I will give you one that I thought was good that, again, I'm not even sure it was the wrestling aspect of it, but his rivalry with Brock Lesnar, I thought was very good. They had one match, and God, I can't remember which one it was, but he got his absolute ass kicked.
Oh, you're talking about SummerSlam in 2014 when he gets squashed by Brock.
Yeah, but again,
how is that? But how is that like evidence of him being a great wrestler? You just got
it isn't. That's my point. But that's one of the ones that sticks out in my memory because he got his ass kicked.
Yeah, you were living vicariously through Brock Lesnar beating his ass.
But I also think no. I think it was a lot to do with the fact that Brock Lesnar was in a position where, oh my God, there's somebody here that they're making to look more like John Cena is beatable. Like he's beatable, and they made. I mean, Brock Lesnar at that point they were making him into this unbeatable monster, and you had to do it with John Cena. But again, I challenge you. What I would tell you is this: when he came back and did his run with the U.S. title, like you had talked about being one of his best runs, I thought that was a time where he put on some of his better matches with people who weren't true veterans. And
right. Look at those guys, right? Sami Zayn
yes,
was part of that. Cesaro was part of that. Kevin Owens was a part of that. Those were some big guys that he was able to make. And they were not that you're not taking away their talent. And so this is like my problem with your other argument is like, well, he's in the ring with Triple H, so he can't be considered that good of a wrestler. If you're really not that good, it doesn't matter who you're in the ring with. It's going to be crappy. So I think you have to give some credit to the guy to be able to respond to being in that position.
I do.
And I think that's what Cena did.
Yeah, no, and I do. I do. You were going through those list of matches, and I was like, those are all guys that I mean, you put Triple H in there with Scott Steiner, and he came up with probably, it could have been a lot worse, and so anyways, is my point. I agree with you though. Those are all great matches of John Cena's career for sure.
There's a few more that I want to throw out there because those are kind of early on. This one's from 07, but his first matchups with both Randy Orton and Batista they're both SummerSlam 2007 and 2008 respectively. Check those out. I think they're really good because they're those first time matchups. So it's like there's an excitement from the crowd itself, and those matches are really great matches. On anything from his U.S. title run from 2015 to 2016, you're going to enjoy it. The Kevin Owens matches from Elimination Chamber, Sami Zayn, all that. Royal Rumble 2015, the triple threat match, Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins are a part of that. My God, just chef's kiss. One of the best triple threat matches I've ever seen.
So I'll give you those for sure. Like those ones, if you're throwing those ones out there, I'll give you those too, because those aren't the people that I would consider at that time to have like this incredible resume of matches, And I'll give you those for sure. Yeah. And I think that was kind of the time when he, was starting to push some new talent. He needed it. Like is like Stone Cold when Stone Cold but didn't have The Rock. Like you got to build up and have these new opponents that can make you look good, because if you don't, it's no good. The only again, I'm on such a negative side of this. I'm trying to be super positive.
I know you're trying.
But the only negative thing I'll say is John Cena had this when he came back in that US title run, he had this like formula. If you go back and watch the matches, you'll agree with me. It was like, let them win the first match and then John Cena wins every other match. It was like, let him win one, and then it shows that, hey, wait, there's a chance, and then John Cena just wins. And again, I'm not looking at it as a negative. Again, I think when you're a star like that and you're kind of at an echelon and a level above certain other people, and you're trying to push these new people. I thought it was great when Kevin Owens came in. I thought that was a really big moment for him. And I thought for some of these other stars, like he had a few matches with Dean Ambrose. He had, there was a time, I mean, and we're not even talking about Bray Wyatt, but what he had a pretty good feud with them. And I think one of Bray Wyatt's biggest moments was when he faced John Cena at WrestleMania, and I thought those were all great too.
It's funny because as much as there's that criticism about him as a wrestler, you can't understate just how important it was for wrestlers to be in a program with him. They gained something from it. And I think, wrestling acumen aside, in this business, you can't understate that. Like that's an incredibly important aspect. Is what does the crowd think of you after you've gone up against somebody like the caliber of John Cena? It made a lot of stars.
Oh, 100%.
Maybe not. I mean, even if it isn't made necessarily, people walked away from it better than they did.
Agreed.
No,
I agree. And I think one that I think it's important to talk about this, but his rivalry with The Rock. Right?
Yeah, that was significant.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting time because there were a few things going on, and I'll let you give your opinion on this here too, because I know how much you love The Rock. But I think at that time, John Cena laid down the line of, hey, everyone loves you. You betrayed us, Rock. Come back and fight me. I'll never leave WWE. I will always be a WWE guy. As time moved on, I think he found, we all know what happened, and it's fine. I don't blame him. At some point, you have to move on. But I think at that time, if you go back and read about it, The Rock was not happy that he called him out. He ended up coming back, to The Rock's credit, and putting on a great rivalry with him, something that was very unique because they gave us WrestleMania a year before it even happened. And again, things felt very personal during that rivalry too.
Yeah.
But again, I think I'm glad that it happened. And I think if you were probably to ask both of them, I think they're glad it happened. I think it happened in a very weird way. And at the end, I think The Rock was kind of justified because John Cena's doing the same thing. But at the time, it was like he was the defender of the fan base, and it was very interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for people who maybe are listening to this, watching this, and have not seen that rivalry, or maybe you didn't start watching wrestling till after that time, if you can stand to navigate Peacock, go back in there and just type in Cena versus Rock. There's a documentary called Once in a Lifetime, which is sort of ironic because they fought twice, but it has a really good breakdown from both of them, talking about how this rivalry kind of started and progressed. So I would encourage people, if they're not really familiar with it, like watch that little documentary. It's only an hour. It gives you a lot of great background on it. For this rivalry in particular, I think I always found myself like fascinated by this. I remember when we were in college and John Cena did some interview with MTV, and he was calling The Rock out then, and that was like 2008. And I was thinking to myself, what? No way. We were all talking to each other like, oh, The Rock's going to come back and do that.
Yeah.
Fast forward 3 years and he finally comes back and this all gets started. But when you look at John Cena, where he was at that time, I think he was, like you said, he was almost like defending the business, defending the fans. And I think it was kind of misguided. I don't think he fully understood what Rock was doing for the business, even though he wasn't on TV every week, even though he wasn't wrestling full time for years at that point. And that's sort of a mindset that has largely gone away nowadays. I think the fan base is a lot more savvy, a lot smarter. I think there's sort of an old school mindset that I believe Vince had too. And that was, Vince had this, Vince Sr. had this. You can go back to when Hulk Hogan was going to do the Rocky movie and he got fired for it. So there was a protection of that business of, you only wrestle. If you do anything else, then you're not really protecting this. You're not really a part of this. So I think there was a little bit of that mindset at play in what Cena was saying to him. And it just got a little uglier once Rock was actually back. And, to give Cena credit, as much as I love The Rock, John Cena owned him. Promo-wise, absolutely fucking destroyed him on the mic. And it hurts me to even say that because I wanted it to be the other way around. I so badly wanted it to be. But the reality was, man, John Cena just roasted him. And I mean, from bell to bell. Rock had some good stuff. Don't get me wrong. Rock had some fun promos. Like there's one when he was in Boston and he's just going through all these historical spots. And there was one promo where he like talked about John Cena sticking a feather up his ass and calling him a jabroni. That was a great promo. But overall, John Cena destroyed him. Absolutely rocked him. So I think in many fans' eyes, it elevated Cena just to have the opportunity to go head to head with The Rock in that way, let alone what they did in the ring, which those aren't my favorite matches, to be honest, but I do think that what they represented was really important.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to John Cena's career. I don't think you're going to look back and say he had these unbelievable 5-star matches. I think that's okay. I'm not saying he had these awful matches. He's the worst wrestler of all time. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you're going to not look back. You're going to look back at him and he's not going to be like the HBKs, the Bret Harts, it's a different influence. And that's all my point is throughout this whole thing. Yeah. And that's okay though. That's okay. I'm okay with it. That's the legacy I think he leaves. And again, it's the same thing with Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, you're not going to go back and look at these bangers of matches. That's not what he was. And I think John Cena led a very similar career to Hulk Hogan. I'm not saying they're the same person by any means, but he led a very similar career. And I think that's okay. I will tell you though, if one thing I missed, okay. first of all, let's wrap up the Rock piece, because I think that's one of John Cena's most important rivalries, and I think it was great that he was able to do it not once but twice.
Yep.
And then at the end got his due, and the Rock really, did a lot. I mean, that's a very selfless thing for the Rock to do, and come back when he's rusty and he's like one of the biggest movie stars in the world. I think that's huge. I also think one of the worst things that Cena ever did in the WWE, and I stand by this 110%, was the stupid spinner belt. I hated the spinner belt with a passion. I hated that thing. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to point that out there. I can't not talk about John Cena and not mention the stupid spinner belt. It was awful. I hated it personally. I don't know your thoughts on it, but it was terrible.
I mean, I didn't matter much to me. I thought when I first saw it, I was like, oh, people are gonna buy this. This is just gonna be a toy. I remember even back then, like, this is gonna be a thing that you're gonna want to get. But I didn't really think too much about the title piece of it. But
it's just one thing that always irked me, and I just needed to get it off.
I get it.
I needed to get it off. I need to get it off my chest. So
this is a safe space, Vito. Let it out.
Yeah. Okay. But let's wrap up with this. We did this episode because, John Cena announced his retirement, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know we didn't get too in depth into everything in his career, and we could probably go on and talk about more.
Too much.
Right. But couple things. Number one, I want to give John Cena a lot of credit because he has done a pretty good job in his acting career too. And I think that's really great because I wouldn't have guessed that. If you watch The Marine, you probably would look at it and say, oh, this guy ain't gonna make it in Hollywood. But he's done a really good job. He's actually really funny. He's done a good job. I enjoy watching him. And listen, this is a guy who's telling you that John Cena was not his favorite wrestler. I'm giving him credit where credit is due. I think he's doing a great job. I also give him a lot of credit for coming back and doing the little runs that he has, and I think it's been great for his career, and he's done it in a really great way. So I will give him credit for that. But let's end with this. How does his career end? What are we going to see? And who would you like to see it end with?
Oh, I don't know how it's going to end. I have no idea. It could just be he has a match at the end of December, and I don't know if he ends up going out on top. Some people do. I mean, Sting just did. But if there's anybody that I want to see him go against, well, there's a few people. One of them is Gunther. I think he would be a good out of John Cena, but I do think it would be. I think Cena could hold up, and that's a guy that's like kind of just bursting on this scene. He's the world heavyweight champion. He just had an absolute banger with Randy Orton, and I think he's got a lot of gravitas to his character, and I think that's somebody that John Cena would want to work with. Braun Breaker too,
I was going to say Braun.
That's that guy's just so good. Those are the two that just like pop in my head right now. There's probably going to be more once we even stop talking today, but those are the two that come to mind at the moment.
Yeah, for me, I think it would be great to see him have a run against some of these guys like that. Like you said, I think that'd be good. But I think when it comes down to dwindling it down to the end, I'd love to see him go out against the guys that he's been facing throughout his career. The Randy Ortons, CM Punk, Lesnar. Like I think kind of running the gauntlet at the end against those guys would be great, but also at the beginning going against giving those other guys a rub would be awesome. That's my
opinion. I'd love him to go against Cody. That would be a great match too. I mean, talk about the next generation guy that they kind of see like that.
Yeah, agreed.
I think Cody fits that bill.
Agreed there. I'll say the last thing before we end it here. If there was one match I do wish we saw, I really wish we could have seen a Hogan versus Cena or a Stone Cold versus Cena. I know it's kind of in a weird time period there, and it would have been tough. But like if it was just a little bit mesh, I think Hogan versus Cena. Well, I don't know that the match would be unbelievable. I do think the gravity of the match would be a really cool thing to see. And I also think Austin versus Cena would have been really great.
Nice.
Better than people would have given it credit for.
Yeah, those are big ones. Those are big ones. I would agree with both of those.
Yeah.
It's a first for this show. I agree with both of your suggestions.
I know. Holy moly.
Oh,
Wow. We better end it here.
Yeah, it's too good. It's too good. If we keep going, we're just going to get in a fight. All right. Well, Vito, this was fun. I feel like we could keep talking about Cena because there's so much we didn't even get to touch on. But I'm going to try to post that on our socials. I'm going to try to post our match listing.
Yeah, and I think
take a look at it. Let us know what you think.
And I think if any of the people listening, our fans or our listeners, have any, if you think there's someone we missed that John Cena should be facing on the way out, let us know. I'd love to hear it in the comments because it would be awesome. Or if there was a match that, like a dream match that never happened that you would have loved to see with Cena, post it in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was great discussion today, Vito. I'm glad we could do this. The stars aligned. We're back in the saddle again. Always fun talking about a guy like John Cena who's just had such a massive career and legacy in this business. And, now with summer over, Vito and I are hopefully going to be more available. So keep an eye out on those feeds. Keep an eye out for our YouTube channel. We'll have more stuff coming your way very soon. But until then, enjoy the match listing. We'll go through some of those. Let us know what you think. And until next time, keep on strutting, jabronis.